In the wild and unforgiving wilderness of Canada, there lies a legend of fortune and failure. The Klondike Gold Rush, a story of ambition, greed, and the search for riches that turned dreams into tragedy. Thousands flocked to the Yukon, seeking wealth. But how many really struck it rich, and how many were left with nothing but rocks and regret? Picture the harsh reality they faced. The bitter cold, the treacherous mountains, the frost-bitten fingers, and the endless days of labor. This wasn't a story of instant success, it was a gamble, a desperate race against time. But when the gold didn't appear as promised, what did these men and women find? Stripped of hope, with nothing but the stories of those who succeeded, stories they couldn't quite grasp themselves. In 1896, a discovery in the Klondike region changed everything. Gold, a glittering promise of wealth. The news spread like wildfire, igniting the imaginations of thousands from all corners of the world. But it wasn't just the rich who heard the call. It was the poor, the desperate, and the dreamers, all hoping to strike it rich. But what awaited them wasn't just fortune, it was peril. Imagine the excitement that must have surged through their veins. As the first reports came in, the gold gleaming like the light at the end of a tunnel. For many, this wasn't just about riches, it was about survival, about securing a future for their families. And yet, in their excitement, they couldn't see the dangers lurking ahead. To reach the gold fields, they had to travel treacherous mountain paths, crossing harsh terrain that tested their willpower. The Chilkoot Pass, only the strongest could make it, and those who didn't fall behind. They battled freezing temperatures, disease, and exhaustion. The path was not just a journey, it was a trial of survival. Those who survived the grueling journey across the Chilkoot often paid the price with frostbite and exhaustion. They could only imagine what awaited them on the other side. The land they hoped would bring them fortune. But as the snowstorms intensified and their supplies dwindled, some lost more than just their dreams, they lost their lives. Arriving at Dawson City, the scene was a far cry from the paradise they had imagined. Miners were met with overcrowded camps, inadequate supplies, and grueling labor. The gold, it wasn't easy to find. The Klondike wasn't just a river of riches, it was a river of stones. For every nugget they pulled from the river, there were dozens of rocks, each one heavier than the last. Hopeful miners soon realized the price of gold: sweat, tears, and sacrifice. And those who thought they would strike it rich were soon overwhelmed by the harsh conditions. The gold they hoped would flow freely was buried deep within the earth, requiring backbreaking labor to retrieve. Some spent years digging through the frozen soil, only to find themselves empty-handed, their wealth slipping through their fingers like sand. As winter set in, the gold rush turned into a fight for survival. The harsh cold froze the bones of even the toughest miners. Their food supplies dwindled. The work didn't stop, though. Day after day they toiled, desperate to make their fortune. But many of them, by now, had come to a grim realization: in the Klondike, the only thing colder than the snow was the bitter truth that striking it rich was more a fantasy than a reality. Some miners were forced to trade their meager gold finds for food or supplies, only to watch their small treasures slip further away. For many, their bodies were worn down to nothing. And yet, they kept working. For the glimmer of gold kept them going sometimes. That was the only thing they had left to hold on to. Most miners didn't leave the Klondike with pockets full of gold. They left with nothing. The harsh truth of the gold rush wasn't riches, it was broken bodies, abandoned dreams, and lives lost in the unforgiving wilderness. For many, it was a tragedy, people who risked everything, hoping for wealth, but finding only emptiness. And for the lucky few who did find gold, the cost was still heavy. Disease, starvation, and death were their constant companions. The sudden boom in wealth for some was followed by a crash or bust that left many with nothing but the memories of their struggles. The towns that had sprung up around the gold rush were soon abandoned, left to rot as the miners moved on, hoping to find the riches that had eluded them. By 1899, the gold rush was over. The miners had gone, the dreamers had returned home, and Dawson City was left to decay. What was once a bustling town of hope and riches was now a ghost town, with only the whispers of its past remaining. The gold rush may have ended, but its legacy, the tragedy, the broken dreams, and the stories of the forgotten miners remains, lost in the passage of time. So, was it a triumph, or was it just a rock? Thousands struck out in search of wealth, but for most, they left with nothing but memories of a time they had hoped would change their lives. The Klondike Gold Rush was a gamble, and in the end, the odds were stacked against most. The true cost of that gold wasn't in the price of the metal, but in the price of the lives lost along the way. The gold rush was romanticized in history books, but the lives lost, the forgotten workers, the families who sacrificed everything, were barely acknowledged. And the truth behind their struggle often gets buried beneath the success stories of a few lucky miners. What did the country gain from all this? A brief moment of prosperity, but at what cost? The gold rush was a gamble. For most, the promise of riches was never fulfilled. Their labor, their pain, their struggles, they were erased from history. The true heroes of the Klondike Gold Rush are still waiting for recognition. Their sacrifices forgotten, their names lost to time. Even today, the descendants of these workers continue to fight for recognition. They continue to ask, what did we build this for if not to be remembered? And the truth is, we've all forgotten. Forgotten the people who worked tirelessly to make this country what it is today. Forgotten the labor that made this nation possible. The echoes of their struggles aren't just in the past, they still reverberate, silent but insistent, in the lives of their children, grandchildren, and generations yet to come. What does it mean when we erase the people who built this country from our history? What does it say about us as a nation when we forget the workers, the builders, the laborers who laid down the foundation for everything we take for granted today? The echoes of their struggles are still there, haunting us, asking us to remember, to acknowledge, and to honor them for the sacrifices they made. Canada's railway is a legacy built on both triumph and tragedy. But can we really call it a triumph if we forget the people who paid for it? Can we move forward while erasing their sacrifices from history? A nation that forgets the sacrifices made, for it cannot truly move forward. It must first acknowledge the debt it owes. And that debt isn't just monetary, it's a debt of recognition, of respect, and of memory. As we look back on the history of Canada's railway, it's important to ask ourselves, who does this legacy truly belong to? Does it belong to the politicians and the railroad companies who profited from it? Or does it belong to the workers, the men who toiled for years, their bodies broken, their names forgotten? We cannot continue to celebrate this achievement without acknowledging the price that was paid for it. What's left for the workers who built this country with their hands? For the workers who laid down the tracks but never got the credit? What happens when we erase the workers from the story and only celebrate the triumphs? It's time to rewrite history. It's time to acknowledge the workers who built this country and give them the recognition they deserve. Moving forward means learning from the past and honoring the contributions of those who were left out of the story. What happened to the workers who built the railway? Where are their stories? Where are their monuments? These are questions we must ask if we truly want to move forward as a nation. We must learn from the past, and we must honor the people who helped create the country we live in today. Their story matters. Their sacrifices matter, and it's time we told it. If this story opened your eyes to the untold history of Canada's railway, don't let it fade into the past. Subscribe to Maple Myths and help us make sure the voices of the forgotten are heard. Let's honor those who built this country and finally tell their story. Subscribe now and join us in keeping the truth alive.